protect it. He hadn't blown up, which was the first good news Bennett had gotten in quite a while. Upon his team's arrival in Trivium, Izaiah looked just as pleasantly surprised by that fact, slapping him on the back.
Feeling like I jammed a fork into a wall socket with my spine.
See? I knew you'd be fine, the old Medolian exclaimed. Trudging through the entrance to the unearthed city, Bennett's body felt stretched as thin as packing tape and packed to the brim with static electricity.
Basically terrified of touching anything conductive right now.
Stranger still, no matter how many steps he took, it didn't feel like his feet were actually reaching the ground, which was very disconcerting and annoying. Existing on the Eve planet kind of hurt.
Just a little, not gonna lie.
But he was sure he'd be able to tough it out.
After all, who hasn't waltzed down the street in an alternate universe before?
Stepping away from the tall golden ring they'd shifted through, one of three, and passing through a gold turnstile, he felt as if he were about to ride something that exited into a gift shop, but instead stepped into the beginnings of an unearthed urban sprawl. The city stretched for what must have been miles, rolling up and down with the landscape before the horizon halted and was topped with jagged, gray mountain peaks. The buildings they passed appeared to be made of rock or cement, each with its own unique, muted color scheme. Some were short, while others were a few stories tall. When Bennett asked why they couldn't shift directly to the Tribunal, Izaiah answered, "The mountains of the planet make it nearly impossible to shift anywhere safely but the city's main entrances. Even to someone like me. Gotta hoof it, I'm afraid." The group's pace was brisk, and Bennett had to ignite his rapture just to keep up, finding the adverse effects of being in Trivium were lessened the more he did. Continuing on like this would be a hefty strain, but a constant flow of Highwind's energy made remaining on the planet far more bearable. He focused on the lives they could save if their mission was successful, the destruction that might be averted, and tried imagining what his brother Jerry would have done in each moment as they came. Soon, Bennett wore a brilliant blue glow, allowing him to move unimpeded and take in the atmosphere properly. There was a mess of smells to discover, some organic, reminding him of the Texas farm his Uncle Skip had owned, until the bank had foreclosed and he was forced to live in an RV in Arkansas. Other scents were earthy, like copper, reminding him of an ore mine he'd visited when he was 12. As they moved farther into the city, a murky stink like smokestacks found his nose. Some smells might have been cooking. Some definitely weren't. The businesses they passed had signs out front, just like on Earth, usually with a couple of odd symbols, blocky shapes, or both across their faces. Many sprinkled throughout were written in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and even some French here and there. But alien languages were definitely king, and some of those were just fucking weird. One sign, for example, simply looked like a butthole. As they passed through the empty civilization, Bennett wished the city would come alive and get back to normal. He wanted to see the way unearthed society functioned on a typical day. Their current task would have been made harder, sure, but he was curious to see all the crazy shit Izaiah, Hannah, Felix, and the Medolians spoke about. Of all the creatures described to him so far, Bennett most wanted to see the giant, round creatures of grief, the Lostros. They sounded funny. Presently, Izaiah and Felix had taken the lead, gabbing back and forth at the front of the expedition, while Bennett and Hannah sank into the rear. Throughout the trek, The soldier had noticed a twitch in her right hand coming and going, in addition to a continual licking of her lips. Both were tics he recognized and knew all too well.
Saw him all the time with Lance, and my old man, and me.
As though sensing his stare, Hannah clenched and relaxed her fists, sniffing the air. Something I don't like here. Felt it since we arrived. Can you sense it?
Not sure. Maybe.
Bennett answered. Focus. You're gonna have to multitask. When I was learning to use my power, I used to think of every job as being behind a pane of glass in my mind. As long as I kept the glass clean, everything would work out fine. Usually. Bennett had no idea what she meant.
I think I get it.
It's a city, a mixture of sensations, Hannah said. Pick out the ones you want to focus on. Some are nice. Some are not so nice. Civilians get to move toward the nice ones. Peacekeepers have to head for the not so nice ones. She were speaking to Bennett as though he were at an orientation meeting for a menial 9 to 5. He fought to find the signal she was speaking of, but still needed to close his eyes to sense Eve, forcing him to take turns using one type of vision, then the other. Pockets of grief, dread, and Madame Daphne's shade, fervor, were all around, but focusing on everything while continuing to feed his rapture shield proved exhausting. Might be nothing, Hannah said. Too bad we don't have Mara. She'd know if something were hiding out there.
Yeah, I heard she hunted down a bobon in the Amazon once,
Bennett said, quoting Felix. Kidding, since he had no idea what it meant. Ha! True, Hannah said, sounding proud.
Forgive me for asking, but what's up with you two?
Hannah gave him an inquisitive look.
Bullshit. I saw what happened back there. Fess up.
She scoffed. You didn't see anything. Bennett kept a hard stare on her, sick of the baloney. Guess it was pretty obvious there's some history, she said.
Better believe it, sister.
Hannah sighed, sounding less than half assured for the first time. When I met her, we were in the middle of fighting a war. A war she hated. Still hates. One thing you need to understand about Mara. She was born just a few centuries before Infurious. She barely knew what life was before every friend she ever had killed themselves in front of her to end something she never understood the need for.
Didn't know any of that,
Bennett said. Nobody talks about it, especially her. Infurious not only took the closest thing she had to a family, it also introduced her to me, which is, I'm sure, another reason she hates it so much. Hannah chuckled to herself before her tone was crippled with sincerity. I remember it. When I first saw her, she was on the battlefield. The most graceful thing I'd ever seen. For some reason, I remember thinking she was a blonde. Not that it's important. But after the fight, she was all I could think of. When it ended, following the purge, we actually lived in TC for a while. A lot of us stayed in the city initially. You were allowed to if you didn't have any contacts or work on Earth. It was a strange time. A transitional period. For all of us. Mara and I had a place on the other side of town. Then things went wrong. Really quickly. The fights got to be too rough, even for me. Not that I regret any of it. We went for it. Least, I know I did. But Celestials and Medolians just can't be together. The diamond and the rainbow, you know? Both want to shine. Especially two high rankers. Conflict of interest, I suppose. Mara would never give up her position. Everything else, and I mean everything else, is second. So, when I did what I felt was right, something which would have allowed us to finally be together, she saw it as a betrayal.
What did you do to piss her off so much?
I gave up my position.
As a general?
Mm-hmm. After the war, I didn't want to live in a society that would perform a mass exodus like that. Plus, I was just so tired of being a perfect creature. Being absolute but killing anyway makes you lose all sense of yourself. Hannah looked the other way. When her bright blue eyes returned, Bennett realized how much he loathed their absence. When I did it, left the council and became an Eve human, I really thought Mara was going to be happy. Hannah's voice came damn close to cracking. Shows how little I knew her. Mara Lauren, my greatest challenge and greatest failure. But how about you? Still implosion-free, I see. Bennett wanted to keep talking with Hannah about her and Mara, which was far more interesting and less distracting than talking about himself. But he could tell she wanted to drop it, so he did.
Existing right now, here, is about the strangest thing I've ever felt, he said.
You're not new to it. You've traveled between realities before.
What do you mean?
When they put the rapture in you, the night you and Alex died, where do you think you went for the procedure?
Never thought about it.
Think about it now. He did.
Highwin?
Hannah nodded. Congratulations. You're officially, technically, the first human ever to go to heaven. Though not really. Bennett wondered if something was wrong with him, as learning this had almost no effect on his psyche.
No time for blue ribbons.
Keeping the rapture flowing was taking a lot of his will, and all of his focus.
But Izaiah said humans can't go that far into Unearth. The only reason I'm in Trivium is that it's located on the first floor, or something.
I'm not sure how they did it. I'm only sure they did, Hannah said. Maybe someday you'll be able to confront the ones responsible and ask them not only how, but why.
Pretty sure they did it so I could be useful in situations like this, Bennett said. But right now, I'm no use at all.
Discounting yourself and forfeiting are the same in my book, Hannah said. You throwing in the towel?
No, but look at me. I'm a wobbly fuck just trying to balance here. You saw Isaiah's clip show. This is some serious, biblical, heavy hitter needed kind of shit. Not blue sparklers. I wish I had a big gun in my hands so bad, you have no idea. Bigger the better. Belt-fed would be nice.
We've been over this. You need to get more creative. Think outside that box, she said. The rapture is ready to work for you. Figure out what you want before you begin. Find the clearest thought, grab hold, and ride it all the way to shore. Don't let up. Don't look away. Bennett finally knew what she was talking about. Every time he'd activated his rapture, it seemed to slip away before he could follow through, He had the same problem with his golf swing.
When you picked up the smallest Gehenna stone, after Mara dropped it, you were focused on making the protective shield, right?
He asked her. No, on getting the stone to the right place, into the right hands. The goal is key. That's the thing about rapture. It's not any purer than the other shades of Eve. Highwind is just as bureaucratic, power-hungry, and full of shit as Eros. It's simply an odd coincidence rapture is the shade of Eve ignited by doing what's usually the right thing. Bennett was sent back to preschool, sitting on a soft mat with a big number 3 and a Tonka truck, being told hurting other people's feelings is bad and puppies and turtles are good.
The right thing? That's such cryptic bullshit. How can anyone know?
Hannah interrupted discreetly. Learn its language. Follow its lead. Odds are your rapture knows what would benefit the most people in any given situation better than you. Once you think you've got the hang of it, then take back control. Don't try to do too much all at once. Just do whatever you can. You'll see. Bennett almost stopped in place, hearing his brother's voice in his head.
Do what you can, King Arthur. What did you say?
Bennett asked. Everyone can help. Just depends how much of themselves they're willing to give, Hannah said. Everyone has an option in front of them that will lead to happiness and calm. If you pick the right road, you'll never be steered wrong. She eyed his sudden distance. You okay? Bennett wanted to move on.
Sure. It's just, I can't do the things you can. You've known this stuff your whole life, which sounds like a really, really long time.
It won't all come at once. Just have some faith it will. You do know what that is, correct? Hannah asked with a suspicious glance.
Are you asking if I believe in God or something?
Bennett said.
'Cause after all the crap that's happened so far, it's pretty clear he ain't coming. My Nana would be mortified.
She shook her head. Shut up and listen. I asked if you had faith. Different things. Faith is about the belief in something everyone else tells you can never happen. What only you know to be true. Having faith is about watching one result 1,000 times and deciding to go once more, believing it will change.
Some people call that being an idiot,
Bennett said. And they have a great case for it, except that change is the only true constant in the universe. So, mathematically speaking, the result will eventually change. Just depends how long you're willing to wait.
So, you're asking if I think we can succeed,
said Bennett. More if you believe in yourself and the moment. Do you believe you belong here? Do you believe you and Alex are part of the whole? Part of this and every universe? Or just happenstance?
Up until now, I didn't see human beings as anything more than goo in skin suits, walking around, handing out Bibles, eating quarter pounders, being good little barcodes for those in power till they die.
Hannah laughed. That's one way to look at things. Always amazed me. The holy books of the earth seem to tell a story of humanity being weak. Sheep. Every great power seems to look at your average person as a fragile thing they can control. I never understood it. Not the books, but how people believed it. Why let a book tell you you're powerless? why let arithmetic or a company do the same? Mortals don't realize they are only worth as much as they believe they are. So, tell me, do you have faith that you and others have worth? They rounded a corner into another long, gray asphalt lane dotted with street lamps.
I guess. I don't know,
Bennett answered. That's a perfectly reasonable answer. But if you want to unlock this thing inside you, might want to start thinking about it. For some reason, Bennett wanted to continue arguing, then realized he was only arguing against himself. He stayed quiet a few moments more, until something down the right lane, possibly a bucket, was knocked over, breaking the silence. Looking into the inlet, he saw a dead overhead lamp that left a dark spot, giving Bennett flashbacks of the demon Izaiah in the alley in London, and the feeling that someone new was watching them in the shadows. A realization set in. He and the others were perfect prey, in an open lane, with no witnesses or bystanders to muck up an assault. Bennett's gut dropped. His adrenaline spiked. Izaiah? Hannah asked softly. The oldest Medolian's pace quickened. I know, but why? He said, sounding weary. Get ready, everybody.
Guess they know something I don't.
Gripping the black and gray marbled knife gifted to him by Hannah, Bennett drew it from its leather sheath. If an attack was coming from anywhere, he figured it would be from the air, and so kept his attention skyward. A moment later, they crossed a second shadowed inlet, which Izaiah and Felix passed in peace, bringing down Bennett's defense one too many notches. On his turn to pass, a sharp whisper came from the darkness on his left. Psst! Hey, buddy! Bennett spun to the open alley as a flash of smoke and a heap of snot struck his face. What felt like a truck with claws doing 80 miles per hour slammed into his chest, tackling him off his feet. The goo was an acid of some sort, guessing from the smell, and how it clearly wanted to devour his flesh. But luckily the rapture pumping through him acted as a barrier. Bennett fought to contain the enormous wild animal on top of him, and their razor-sharp talons stemming from stubby claws running the length of the archfiend's body.
Fucker looks like a centipede from down here.
Go to sleep, little human! The creature shrieked, trying to bite Bennett's head off. The soldier howled and gained some ground using the archfiend's own momentum, able to swing out from under it to top position, and brought the knife down into what he figured was the demon's belly, expecting only to annoy or anger them. Instead, they froze. Their red eyes curled in pain as their whole body drooped, crusting over, becoming like brown rock in the area surrounding the knife wound. As the creature's breath faded, so did Bennett's fear of them.
Well, all right.
Dozens of human-sized snakes had taken to the sky, growling in unison, forming a rolling thunder over the trivium block. The archfiend flowed in streaks of red and brown, swooping through the air like giant ribbons pulled by dancers. Hannah was dealing with a handful nearby. We have to get the stone to the Tribunal, she shouted whilst tearing a demon in half. Dashing for Izaiah, who was surrounded amid a cluster of archfiend, Bennett dodged snarling jaws swooping from above as he fought forward and was grabbed by an especially skinny beast, screaming with a shriller call than the rest. Bennett wrestled them back, finding out the hard way his shield was not perfect when the demon clamped their jaws onto his shoulder. To his delight, the rapture responded, sending a gust of power to his limbs. Using both hands, Bennett was able to get a hold of the Archfiend's protruding teeth from below and yanked down as hard as he could, ripping the creature's jaw open, dropping pools of blood, saliva, and razor-sharp teeth. The demon cried so loudly Bennett thought he might go deaf, and so shut them up by slamming them in the temple, causing the Archfiend's grip on him, and their consciousness, to be released. As the battle wore on, Bennett dropped 3 more Archfiend, racking up injuries of his own. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion, and his hands appeared to be acting on their own. Blood sprayed. Fire, ice, and demon acid filled the air. Somewhere on his left, as he carved up a demon who'd latched onto his leg, an Eve signature approached Bennett that he didn't register initially. He then froze and turned back, terrified, when he realized.
I know that signal.
Following a blaring crash and a sound like an explosion, a voice rose above the din. Felix, crying out in pain. Bennett dropped everything and made his way to the largest mass of chaos, meeting Hannah along the way. They came upon their janitor friend lying on the ground, holding his side, looking in bad shape. "They're here!" Felix shouted as a huge ball of Medolian energy with orange highlights coursed over the area, bringing every warrior to their knees. At the center of the attack was Chloe, but next to her was what looked like Joseph. Except this new guy was bigger, and the energy radiating off him tore through Bennett like a mountainous guitar amp.
Shit! His signature's way more potent and disgusting than last time.
The creature's hood was down, but the white mask remained.
Great. Guess he found the 3rd rock.
The demons backed off following the new arrival, taking to the skies.
"We want what was taken from us,"
Joseph boomed with the chaotic force of 1,000 tree roots ripped asunder. Izaiah approached the new duo cautiously. "You must be Joseph. We met once before. You might not remember. Course, I didn't know at the time you and Chloe were a couple. As the closest thing she's got to a father, I feel it's my duty to approve you. Speaking of which, Chloe, how are you, sweetheart? You look like you haven't been sleeping well." "I told you he would stall," Chloe muttered to Joseph, who didn't waste a second responding.
"We won't ask you again."
Joseph's bellows sent a rash of barks through the Archfiend ranks. "You can stop with the we nonsense," Izaiah said. "The game is over. I know the boy died months ago. Mason is gone. There's only one of you left in there. And frankly, I find it sick how much joy you're getting out of this." Joseph's head swiveled back and forth, as though he was frustrated and considering Isaiah's words.
"So, the Cirrus was visited after all. Alas, no, we will not be changing. We like it this way. Call it a little bit of fun before the end. Though, we were hoping you would make a final plea to speak with the boy, to find the man within the monster. It would have been a wonderful game."
Joseph released a low, callous laugh, turning Bennett's gut. Creaking like the bent branches of a dying elm tree, Joseph's fingers opened, revealing his bare palm.
"The brother."
Izaiah shook his head, No can do. In fact, I'd like the both of you to surrender peacefully, so this whole thing can end, and everybody can go eat peanuts and ice cream.
No can do,
Joseph responded. The swarm of Archfiend overhead grew louder, as though ready to make a move. Bennett braced for another wave, while trying to keep an eye on the real action. You don't want to do this, Izaiah said to Chloe. Come on! Where's that spunky, swashbuckling Madolian I used to love? The one who was born as lovely as they come, and who annoyed Mara for 1,000 years, which I loved, then matured into a powerful, sensitive, intelligent... Shut up! She wailed. The demons overhead shrieked and hissed in response. Never again! That's the last time you belittle me. Give us the brother of Gehenna. Don't make me rip it from you. Chloe's cries suggested she were trying to psych herself up, quickly drawing her sword from its scabbard, wavering, but ready. Joseph bellowed,
We tire of waiting. Clan Ailey. Now!
With a wave of his hand, all hell broke loose. The second surge of demons began swooping from above. Bennett couldn't keep track of how many there were, as claws swiped at his back, then his front, then his back again. Amid the action, he lost all sense of where his teammates ended up. Judging by sound alone, Hannah and Joseph had found one another to tussle, while Chloe and Izaiah were trading gigantic blows packed with frenzied neutral energy. A particularly mangled-faced demon managed to wrap their entire body around Bennett like a python.
This one has you!
The Archfiend hissed into his ear, scorching him with infernal heat pouring from their throat. Poisonous drool dripped everywhere as they squeezed until Bennett lost his grip on Hannah's knife, and it fell, lost to the hysteria. Just before everything went black, a sphere of Malos, this one with the hue of vibrant green jubilee, blasted across the block, sending everything in its wake soaring.
That was a Madolian attack!
Bennett and the Python Archfiend were sent smashing into a stone column, and separated when the creature's coil loosened. Next thing he knew, Bennett was being helped up by Izaiah. Bit of a pickle, huh? The Madolian said, dusting him off. Before Bennett could say anything, Izaiah slipped the smallest Gehenna stone into his coat pocket. It's up to you now. Get to the Tribunal, just up the road. Can't miss it. Deliver the stone to Senator Lafleur. No one else. Felix arrived, gripping his side, his dirty t-shirt soaked in red. He seemed in pain, but also bright-faced and eager. How can I help? Izaiah kicked them both along. Get Bennett out of here! To the Tribunal steps! Fastest route possible! Go!
What about the demons? And Joseph and Chloe?
Bennett asked, resisting for some stupid reason. You let me worry about them, Izaiah shouted, turning back to deal with an incoming wave of blistering burgundy skin, thrashing talons, and irate eyes filled with fire. Slamming his cane down, he drew up something like a 50-foot cellophane shield. The beasts crashed into it, held at bay while fighting forward, smushing their faces and snouts, fogging the shield with their hot breath, stacking on one another like grains of sand in an hourglass. Felix and Bennett broke into a sprint down the lane. Bennett managed a few glances backward before taking a turn around the next block. Behind the translucent shield and wall of demons, he spotted Hannah and Joseph trading blows, holding the nameless at bay. The glow radiating from her was glorious.
Never used that word before.
Not to mention the ferocity of her hits, which were backing Joseph up. Defensively, he slashed with his claws, which glanced off her rapture aura with fluorescent sparks. In a swift move, her arm pulled back like a pinball shooter, became a blur, and collided with Joseph's mask, cleaving it in two. The halves drifted to the ground like leaves in the wind, one side clean, the other foul. Catching only a glimpse from a good distance, Bennett saw a mess lying under the mask that could not truly be described as a face. There were green, brown, and orange smears, and two beady eyes nestled at its center, softly glowing red. Then it was gone. The last thing Bennett saw before being forced to focus on more important issues. He and Felix banked through turns, and at one point his archfiend pal took them through a shortcut Bennett prayed was legitimate.
Not that I don't trust Felix, I just don't.
Soon they were sprinting past an immaculate cafe with a patio made of cornflower-colored stone with 4 immense pillars in the corners. Beyond it was a wide-open campus, lined with arching columns along the walkways. A dark shape towered at its center, its shadowed spires rising above the square. Izaiah was right. There was no way Bennett could miss the Tribunal.
Makes the Capitol building look like a Kleenex box.
Approaching the 3-sectioned ziggurat felt strange.
And wrong.
But they did it anyway. Bennett's heart pounded as he and Felix neared the bottom of the center section's steps, dark and moody as they were, and climbed toward the 80-foot teardrop-shaped doors at the top.
"We're home free, so long as nothing else goes wrong,"
Felix coughed out amid exhausted breaths. Bennett got a bad feeling around 1 nanosecond before an eave gate burst open ahead of them. A shift, to be sure, but something about this one was savage, raw, and reminded him of foul meat burning on a fire. The wave of energy struck him, shoving him backward a couple of steps, and when the flash faded, Joseph was standing there, by himself.
Cripes and fuck! He shifted!
Felix gasped.
"He can shift? On Trivium? But that's..."
His words faded, as though he were too exhausted and shook to finish. With the mask gone, Joseph's exposed face was like seeing a wet junkyard from above. A mouth opened in the middle of the bullshit, speaking with a repellent voice made somehow worse by being no longer muffled.
"You may stop running."
Felix,
God bless him,
launched an attack so easily tossed aside that Joseph never even turned away from Bennett.
He knows that I have the stone. Can't beat him to the doors. Can't run. Think. Hannah and Izaiah are coming. Stall!
Bennett decided in that moment his official mantra was, fuck it, and made moves to live by it. Gathering as much rapture as he could, he sent every ounce to his right hand, balled it, and hurled it. The fist blazed with violet intensity. Streaks of blue flame trailed behind it as it soared, directly into Joseph's waiting claw. The soldier's hand was clasped by daggers, squeezing, blinding him with white-hot pain, bringing him to his knees.
God damn it!
He roared, desperately punching the monster in the ribcage with his free hand. The hits thudded against soft flesh and bone. It felt as though his fist would break through to a hollow interior if his assault continued. Joseph laughed.
All the way to the end. We love it.
His free claw slashed Bennett across the face 5 times, releasing lines of blood that crawled over the soldier's eyes and dripped onto his chest. The same claw then clasped the Gehenna stone in his pocket and ripped it free, tearing away cloth and a chunk of flesh underneath. Bennett grabbed the wound, attempting to stop the bleeding faucet. Next thing he knew, he was as light as air, tossed away like a banana peel. He struck the pavement,
Or it struck me.
and tumbled down the stairs, stopped only when a pair of helping hands halted him.
You okay?
Izaiah asked, looming over him on one side while Hannah loomed over the other.
Am I okay? Who the fuck cares?
They helped Bennett up, but there was no time for thank yous. Their faces were so full of terror that their expressions appeared blank, while behind them, the sky filled with Archfiend on approach. Up the steps, Joseph, the Titan shape in soiled rags, lifted its new prize to the sky, with the Tribunal and its spires aloft as a curtain behind him. Reaching into his cloak, he revealed the other 2 brothers and brought all 3 together. The reaction was instantaneous and profound. Bennett's senses were rendered null. His eyes were suddenly watering. His fingers began twitching uncontrollably, and he became so tired he wanted nothing more than to lie down and accept a permanent sleep. The Gehenna stones were cradled by Joseph as the magenta swirls within them blasted free of their physical bonds, flinging themselves outward in oblong orbits around his body.
This is it.
He screamed.
The brothers are set free.